as I was looking to offer parental leave to my employees, discovered firsthand how difficult it is to budget for it.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast. I'm your host today. My name is Brett Gilliland. And every episode, somebody from my team is interviewing a real business owner in that seven-figure space who is doing real stuff. And they share real lessons and they share real things that they're working on to continue to grow their business. We're doing this to help as many seven-figure business owners as possible out there with real lessons learned and real challenges that we talk about on this show. Today's guest is Dirk Doebler. Dirk is the founder of a company called Parento. Parento offers paid parental leave insurance for employers who are trying to attract and retain, having a hard time with my words today, attract and retain their key talent. And parental leave, paid parental leave specifically, it's been a hole in the marketplace for a long time. Dirk and his team have solved that challenge and are out there sharing with employers everywhere, anybody who will listen, that there is a way now to help their team members have access to paid parental leave for that very important time in their life when a child is entering their family. Dirk, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Brett.
Dirk, I did my best to give a little overview of Parento, but would love to have you fill in the blanks or share anything else that you want our listeners to hear as context before we jump into the meat of our interview.
Yeah. So I think what's really helpful is understanding some of the backstory because prior to founding Parento, I used to run finance and operations for a company. And so my background actually wasn't in HR or even insurance before starting Parento. And I really came to this problem because as I was looking to offer parental leave to my employees, discovered firsthand how difficult it is to budget for it. How do you make sure that these employees come back when they're taking 3, maybe 4 months off? They're not necessarily doing anything for your business. And then what's the actual return on that? And as I did my research, found out there's a very extensive ROI on that because most people have children and the turnover risk, especially amongst moms, is very, very high if they don't have parental leave. But then that begs the question, all right, great, we know how beneficial this can be for the business over the time, but how do you still fund it? And after speaking with literally dozens of finance leaders at small businesses all the way up to enterprise, discovered, I think what most people know is they're not doing anything for it because they're not offering parental leave. And that's primarily because they don't know how to budget for it or mitigate the risk. And they also don't know the ROI either. So for us, the lack of parental leave in the country here in the US is primarily, from our perspective, a financial problem for companies. And so we're out here to provide financial solutions and budgetable solutions for them to address the challenges that their employees are going to face and business is going to face when those employees inevitably have children.
All right. Well, I think you're solving a problem that needs to be solved. I think it's really a smart idea, and I hope that you guys do well at Parento. Before we move to our questions, one more follow-up question about who you're serving.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a particular size of business that's benefiting from what Parento has created today?
Yeah, so we are primarily focused on the SMBs. We can go down as little as 10 employees, and we have clients that small, but we serve companies that have well over 1,000 employees. And so we really think the sweet spot for us is really going to be in that couple hundred employees up range where they're less concerned about a few people being gone at any point in time. They can handle it from a workload perspective, but from there, they care genuinely about the employee experience and then obviously the expense and budget of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Okay. So there's a large enough pool of team members to justify investing in a program like this and spread out whatever cost to the business
Yep.
in a way that's predictable, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
budget, an expected return on that for their team. All right, cool. Well, Dirk, let's jump into our interview. You've learned a lot over the last several years as you've grown Parento. You personally, as a leader, I'm sure you've changed, but
Mm-hmm.
your team and your business has changed. And so we'd like to have you highlight any key lessons learned that you've learned, you picked up along the way that might be helpful to another business owner.
Yeah. So when I started the company, I closed our first deals by myself. Didn't have any employees whatsoever. Didn't have anybody doing anything on sales or marketing or really handling, actual after, closing what was going on. So then we had to hire up. And one of the first things I think I really learned was not just like hiring people and letting them do their thing, but letting and relying on their expertise, but letting them do it the way they would do it. And for me, one of the challenges I have is I don't spend a lot of time really connecting with the clients when I first have that call. I'm not particularly extroverted, but that's a big piece of sales, like having that 5-10 minutes of chit chat at the beginning of every call, right? For me, I just want to get to the topic, but it's important to let people who are the experts in doing the things that they do, let them really do that, even if you don't necessarily agree with the method. And I think that that's so important because I can give them the tools and the resources to understand how to build a product and how it all works, answer those questions and answer anything on the calls. But it's really important to rely on the expertise's methods and not just like turning them loose, but like let them really convey what they know and alter the way you do things, and getting that feedback is really important. So that was one thing, because it was always hard for me to kind of like just go through that chit chat part, which wasn't always my forte. And then get requesting the feedback from those people on those things that they do differently that you could be doing better, I think is also really important. It's not just what else could I be doing or doing things better, but specifically how you're bringing your skill set to the table and what I'm not as good at, help me understand that. Like, what questions could I be asking during that piece of the call? What should I be doing during that piece of the call? And really diving deeper into that and bringing those methods and not just like what they know and they understand and their background, I think is really, really important. Um, and then letting people really spend time on things that are outside their functional area as well, because you're going to have so many things as a small business that like people just like, you just need hands on stuff, but letting people find things that they're interested in and then giving them the resources to kind of learn and giving some guidance and letting them like take on those newer challenges in an area that they don't necessarily know. So that could be helping with product if they're in sales, or that could be, if they're primarily insurance background, helping with the finances. Like there's some overlap in understanding skills, but that's been really helpful in helping get more resources to do different things, when so you don't have as much, as many things that just one person can do it. Maybe there is someone that can backfill, or hey, this person's underwater, can you step in and take this work on? And so hiring for that is very important. We want people who are intellectually curious here. And so one of the questions we commonly will ask is, what other areas of the business are you interested in, or have you been interested in? What would you like to learn more about? And making sure we're getting answers that make sense based on what else we've heard from them, and not just making something up, but that it aligns with their general interests or what they've told us so far. Because we want, especially as a young business, you need people who are able to be cross-functional and interested in a variety of other things. And so those are some things I've kind of learned along the way, the importance of, at least with regards to headcount and people.
Well, I love the lessons you're sharing. I want to take us on a little summary journey here. I think you started out saying, look, early on, and I'll use the term generalist. You didn't say that, but as a
Mm-hmm.
generalist, you did everything, right? You do all the stuff. Then you bring in somebody who's more of a specialist in their area of expertise, and you said, let them run, let them do it their way. You still provide the process, you provide the best practices for your business,
Mm-hmm.
but if you let them do it their way, they know how to do what they do really well. So let's turn them loose a little bit. So you went from this can't all be generalists to let the specialists do their thing. And then interestingly, you came back around and said, but then for these specialists who do so well, let's broaden what they're able to, ways that they're able to contribute. So you almost went back the other way. And I didn't hear you say, let's turn them all into generalists, but you did say the practical realities in a small business are
Mm-hmm.
that we need to be able to direct resources wherever it's needed. And if you have specialists who are really good at their thing, but they have some interest and some willingness to help out in other ways, that's a way to supplement what's needed on the team and allocate resources a different way. So I love both those points. And it's funny how it kind of went from broader to more narrow, and then from narrow to, hey, let them contribute more broadly.
Yep. Yeah, no, exactly. That's, I think, has been very beneficial for us.
Great stuff. I'd like to dig. We got another minute or two on this part of the interview. I'd like for you to expand a little bit more on the types of questions you ask them when you're trying to find out, hey, is this somebody who's not just going to stick to their narrow expertise, but they're going to come in and have some interest and be able to contribute in other ways.
Yeah, I ask a few things. So one, I ask very directly, like, what other areas of the business have you been interested in? And have you been interested in the finance or accounting or just marketing? What other work has, been done around that? And then I also ask about whether they've worked on new products before, because when you're developing a new product, there's so much work that has to happen, whether, especially if you're involved early on in that R&D process or bringing some work in the project management. What were they involved with specifically? beyond what they typically would have been doing day to day had they not been involved there. And that helps understand, one, did they build extra skill sets kind of outside that day to day work? But then were they involved in things that were like really different? And then do they have oversight or someone overseeing them doing that additional work? So did they actually build skills in some of those other things? And that could have just been managing their projects a little bit more deeply. Could be market research, could be a lot more interviews and things like that, or it could be budget work. So what exactly were they involved with, and then did they have a willingness to actually be really involved in that? And then what were the results of all that work? Did it come to market? How did it perform? What did they do after it came to market? And then I always like to ask too, like, what's feedback that they've gotten that they didn't necessarily agree with? Because I think
Mhm.
that can be really helpful for people who have been working in an area that's not their area, because you're not going to be very good if you're an expert in marketing and you've been helping out in some of the product operations, right? So what, there, with that layer of you wouldn't be as good, was there anything that you disagreed with? And it also helps us understand kind of self-awareness of like, what are they actually good at versus not very good at, and what do they think they're good at but that they're potentially not good at. So that's something I really, those are kind of like two questions I like to regularly ask to kind of better understand, is there someone who's done other things outside their specialty, or do they have the interest to actually do so?
Well, I'm glad that I asked the follow-up questions because it's those types of very practical, some people might even say tactical things that you just shared that are really important to business owners who are trying to figure out how to get better. In this case,
Mhm.
at hiring somebody who's good at what they do, but who have an interest or a willingness to do some other things. And I think you shared some great practices for that. So thank you for that. Let's go ahead and shift gears, Dirk, as you are continuing to grow your business. I gotta assume it's not all sunshine and roses. That everything doesn't just happen smoothly. You're still trying to figure some things out in your journey to scale Parento to where you want to take it.
Yep.
What is something that we could talk about for the next part of our interview that might be not just helpful to you, hopefully, but to others who are listening?
Yeah. So one thing we've actually really discovered is it's all about building new processes, and that's one of the challenges we've had, is how do we get people who didn't work in this organization or functional areas we didn't have not that long ago, but now have built out. And so one of the areas we kind of see challenges is how do we have sales and marketing work together better? What are the processes that they should be having? How frequently should be working? Who should own what? Because there's a lot of overlap between pushing materials and creating that stuff versus like sales needs things out. They need to create cold emails. So that's one of the things we've been trying to figure out and be really helpful for us as a business, is like, how do we go about adjusting these processes for groups that didn't necessarily exist before? And then how do we hire for that when we're bringing in someone potentially new, where you then obviously add in potentially new processes for all those new people?
I think that's a great issue you're bringing up. As our teams grow, as our organization starts to morph, you got in this case now we got a marketing department or team separate from a sales team or department. Like in the beginning, it wasn't that way. It might have even been one person, sort of, you know, spanning both of those roles. Anyway, as that develops out, it's like okay, now there's higher need for coordination between those departments. There's got to be consistent process. So how do we do that? Am I understanding the issue correctly?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Before we dive into some ideas, I always like to give a little, I don't know, importance or some measure of what's on the line or what's at stake if we don't do this. So, in your mind, Dirk, why do you care about this? Why would you even want to have these processes in place? Like, what's the cost of the business if you don't, or what's the opportunity that would be missed if you don't figure this out?
Yeah, so what we believe is that as the sales is on kind of on the front line, they're talking to groups, they're talking to people out there, they're getting a better understanding of what companies are thinking about and how they're viewing our product, the market as a whole, and that information needs to be fed back to marketing over time so they can update our materials that are used externally, our ads, our website, our copy, all of that. And so it can be a really good opportunity. It's really important for us, actually. It's huge for us to be able to filter out like what we're really learning when you're creating a whole new category back into the rest of the business and having things feed off of that. And without that proper coordination, the things not necessarily getting done or passed off properly, like you lose a lot of that insight and you can be operating off of information you had 6 months ago that maybe isn't relevant because you've tested your hypotheses and you found out what you thought was wrong. And so you need to adapt.
Yeah. So if your salesperson or your sales team in this case is just a one-way path out to the market. So we're delivering a message. We're trying to help
Mhm.
people understand and follow our way of thinking. It's just one way. That can serve the business. But if you can turn those on the front lines in the market kinds of resources into um, two-way touch points with the business where the market can now feed back through your sales team
Mhm.
into your marketing process, even your product development team. Here's what the market's saying. Here's what we're bumping up against. Here are the resources we need. That could be hugely valuable for your team, not just your team, any business, right? As we're interacting with the market through our sales motion, how do we get the valuable insights back into our
Yeah,
business the way that we need?
exactly.
Yep. Okay. Good. So kind of important. I hear that that's important. All right. So what are some ideas? Um, let's tackle it in the conceptual realm first, and then maybe we can get into some practical application.
Mhm.
Conceptually, you touched on a couple things already, but there needs to be some point of um, well, I'll tee it up this way. The growing team needs to take targeted, coordinated action, right? And in this case, we want it to be market driven, targeted, coordinated action. So we want some sort of meeting rhythm, the right one. And I don't know, I can't prescribe for you in this one call what the right meeting rhythm is in this case, but you need to have some regular cadence for the salespeople to interact with the right marketing folks or interact with the right product people. And maybe, let's get a little practical here for a second. Maybe that's a monthly, feet on the street, market driven update from the sales team to the rest of the company. Maybe it's not even just to a particular marketing person, but it's like,
Mhm.
here's what we're hearing, here's what we're experiencing, here's what they're telling us out there. Um, so some sort of cadence. I don't know if that's weekly, monthly, quarterly. I don't know who needs to be in the room. Those are all decisions you have to decide based on who would benefit from hearing that information and how often that would be useful. So a meeting rhythm is one way to address that kind of situation. Another way to do it is through a system. And you hear companies talk about, their knowledge base or their learning management system or, or they'll just say Slack channels sometimes, right? But what are the real time ways for somebody to go tap into the latest and greatest understanding of what's going on out there with our prospects, what's going on out there with our customers. And again, on the practical side, that might be as simple as, hey, every time as a salesperson, I'm out there talking to somebody and I hear something that I want to make sure gets relayed back to somebody else on the team. I throw it into the market voice of the customer or voice of the prospect channel on Slack. And we just have a growing repository of those types of comments. That might not feel super organized or super actionable, but it is a way that people could just in real time here's something that I heard that might be useful for somebody else on the team. Um, you could take that comment as far as going to a specific training solution or LMS, like Trainual is one that I'm familiar with, where they have a whole series of trainings for their team, and if there's a place inside of Trainual where people could just suggest, hey, we should be sharing this type of information from our prospects, from our customers. That's a way to capture it. All right, so meeting rhythm, some sort of repository or knowledge base is another way to do it. And then I think there's a way to right now. Both of those ideas I shared were very they required the salespeople or those frontline people to be very aware and
Mhm.
to push things back, right? And so you might need to, well, the meeting rhythm can pull that from them. Hey, it's on the calendar. We do this once in a while, and so that helps to pull. But you might actually also have a champion on the marketing team or on the product team that is the one going and reaching for those insights from the sales team. Um, I would imagine the sales team, if they're properly motivated to improve the sales collateral or the resources available to them to have success out in the market, that they would already be like internally motivated to go and feed those things back to the team. But sometimes it takes a champion on the, I'll call it the internal team or teams, going out to those salespeople on a regular basis and just interviewing them. Say, hey, this is my monthly check-in. We're just gonna have these little interviews where we get your insights so that we can improve what we're creating for you guys. So those are a couple thoughts that come to mind. Would you like to steer any remaining comments a particular direction, Dirk?
No,
It
that's
might
really
even
helpful.
be
But one
illustrative.
one thing too that I think can be challenging is they can get insights, information, and then it can kind of go into a black hole. Like, all right, how do we actually make sure this is getting applied to the materials, to whatever? If you need to create something new, how are we actually making sure that's happening when neither one of them is directly accountable to the other per se? Like, you're not
Oh,
reporting to the other.
you asked a very great follow-up question. Thank you for doing that, because another mechanism that I failed to think of altogether is more of an accountability mechanism, and that is, I call it big three. But every role, I believe, every role in our businesses should have three very clear, measurable things that they're evaluated against. Right, that it's basically represents the value exchange between that person who owns the role and the business. So every pay period, you pay a complete amount of payroll to those team members, right? They get their paycheck, their
Mm-hmm.
expected value down to the cent. You pay that every pay period. How do we know as business owners if we're getting the value down to the measurable, whatever it is, for that role? So, for example, in a marketing role, sometimes marketing roles can be a little fuzzy on how you grade them. There's some creativity involved, there's a lot of project work involved, but the best marketing teams and the best marketing functions are run off of measurable results, right? Measurable activities. So, for example, if you're not getting the lead flow to the salespeople, that would be something you could have for the marketing teams. Like, hey, you're responsible for this many leads per month, or you're responsible for this level of the return on ad spend, or this conversion rate, right? So, actually, that's the point I wanted to make. That conversion rate would speak to the level of help that the sales team is getting in the form of marketing materials or collateral, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if the marketing team, if each team member is responsible for the sales team's success, now you can't, it's hard to put on them, the actual sales number, but you could put on their conversion rate from qualified lead to sale, because they're playing an enabling role, and you want that captured in their expected results for that marketing team. So let me pause there for a second, because you asked great follow-up questions, and because I want to see if this is landing at all for you.
No, it is. That's what we want to make sure of, is that things that come out of those meetings, those conversations, are getting applied in a timely manner.
Yeah, so so now I'm talking about having individual measurement on the marketing team that's tied to salespeople success, right? So that's one lever there. The other thing, as far as like the timely, like how are we building this into the plan and responding, I think you have to build that into the meeting rhythm that we talked about first. So maybe there's, I don't know, in the marketing team's response to the business on a regular basis. I don't know where they report out on their activities and how things are going. They should be reporting out, and it's probably to you as the leader, but it's also, I would pull those salespeople in and say the marketing team needs to make commitments for what they're going to do with the input given from sales, with very clear, we will do this by then, right? What by when, and then some sort of report back follow through mechanism that just is built into the meeting rhythm or the cadence for marketing to report out on their activities.
Mm-hmm.
So I would take it away from just the marketing leader reporting back to you That's got to happen in your one-on-ones. But I would also say, here's the marketing team's report back to the business and that sales team in particular as to what we committed to, the time frame, the status on those things.
Great. No, that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and what's hard is, I like to use the term right size.
Hmm.
Um, we use that sometimes in like when we're talking about downsizing from people like we've got 100 people, we got to get back, down to 80. That's sometimes somebody will throw right size out there instead of downsize, and I can appreciate that context. But I like to use the term right size to describe processes that are developing inside of early stage companies. So when you have 10 people, the processes need to reflect a 10-person company, not a 100-person company. And so any words or phrases I use like meeting rhythm or a mechanism to report back on the progress. I don't want you to hear like a bunch of bureaucracy and too much meeting overhead. You got to right size it, but the principle is the marketing team should be responsible for reporting back to the business, and in particular those sales teams or salespeople, about the feedback that was received, what we said we would do by when. Right? There's a discipline there of we heard you. Here's what we commit to doing by this time, and then there has to be follow up rhythms that show that we're actually making some progress, or that give us an opportunity to come and say we didn't do it. We said we would and we didn't. But at least there's a consistent report back on those commitments.
Hmm. No, that's great. Yeah, and I think that would be very helpful, and having a way to track specifically what those commitments are in real time and having them shared openly would be probably very helpful.
Yeah, as a principle, the transparency is huge, but the on the commitment side, we want what by when commitments, and we want to tie it directly back to what we were hearing, right? So if
Hmm.
salespeople said, "This is what we're hearing from prospects. Here's what we heard from customers," the marketing team has to say, "Got it. We acknowledge, here's what we are hearing from you." And in our busy lives already, like the marketing team's not sitting around waiting for something, right? They have a lot of stuff going on,
Hmm.
but they can make commitments that, based on what you've told us, here's what we commit to do by when. And then as we maintain this communication cadence, this meeting rhythm, then that just becomes the natural flow of things. You guys come and share, we commit back, and then the next time it's like we report back on what we heard, and you tell us or on what we did, and then you tell us the next set of things, right?
Hmm.
So it's just a back and forth communication maintenance rhythm is really what's happening. All right. Well, I think between the ideas of uh, turning your frontline folks into two-way communication or touch points instead of just one way from the business out to the market, but two-way things. That's a great principle that you brought to the table. Like I want stuff to come back from our sales
Hmm.
team, but I want our business owners listening to hear that. Turn your salespeople into two-way communicators for the business, or two-way touch points for the customers, the market, and the business. So do that, and then you're going to have to build in the right communication rhythm or the right meeting rhythm, and I would encourage you strongly to build in some sort of system for capturing either real-time information that as it comes in, or the ongoing repository of needs or best practices. And then I guess finally this point about include in the success metrics for your marketing team the things that matter to the sales team. It doesn't just have to be isolated, like we're measured by our success in marketing. We're measured by our success in marketing as it relates to enabling our salespeople's success. And there is a way to dial in the measurement there so that they feel very motivated by what's going on with the sales team.
Hmm.
All right, Dirk, that's been helpful. Those are issues that are across all sorts of businesses, all sorts of teams. It's not just sales and marketing. It's anytime we have different teams working on different stuff, how do we get them to care about each other a little bit better? And there's some organizational levers that we can pull, like the ones we talked about today. I hope that was useful for you. I appreciate you coming on the show. If some of these businesses who are listening are interested in actually learning more about Parento, where would you send them? How can they connect with you or your team?
Yeah, so they can get more information from our website and schedule time with one of our salespeople via Parento. That's parent with an O, parentoleave.com.
Parentoleave.com. I made the mistake before getting on the show here today. I just typed in parento.com, assuming that wasn't it. So, parentoleave.com. Go to that. Check out what Dirk and team are doing, especially if you're curious about how to put together a paid parental leave program in your own business to attract and retain people. It's a really cool thing that they're doing. And then please, for all of you listening, share, like, comment, review, do all the things to help this episode get in front of as many seven-figure business owners as possible. We might be in different geographies, different industries, slightly different stages of business even, but here in this 1 to 10 million range of business, there are very common things that we're all going through, and we're trying to help as many seven-figure business owners as possible with these episodes. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time on another episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast.